the twin suns of Vera shone brightly across the palace spires, turning the glass towers into rivers of gold and silver light. Inside the grand hall, nobles from many worlds had gathered. Some wore long robes that shimmered like water, others carried armor that hummed softly with energy. The air smelled of rare flowers, and the floor beneath them gleamed like polished stone. Every guest waited for the appearance of the young prince, Kale of Vera, who had called this gathering to speak of new alliances. Among the guests stood Joran, a human envoy from Earth. He wore no robe of silk or armor of light, only a simple dark uniform with the crest of the Terran Alliance stitched near his heart. Compared to the shining robes and jeweled crowns of the other species, Joran looked plain, almost dull. Some nobles whispered as he passed, their voices carrying words like fragile and weak. But Joran did not look at them. His steps were calm, his posture straight, his face quiet. A horn sounded. The hall grew silent. From behind a tall gate of carved silver, Prince Kale entered. He was 19, young for a royal but already carrying himself with pride. His cloak was woven with gold threads, and his crown shimmered with living gems that pulsed with faint light. Though young, Kale believed himself wiser than all. His people, who lived far longer than humans, often told him he was destined to lead with brilliance. Kale moved to the center of the hall, his chin high. His gaze swept across the nobles, but when his eyes found Joran, a faint smile touched his lips. He turned to his court and spoke in a voice that carried across the vast chamber. So this is the human envoy? The one Earth has sent to stand before me? A man with no crown, no power, no shield. Tell me, does your world think so little of this council that they send such a simple figure? Laughter rose from the gathered nobles. Some covered their mouths, others laughed openly. Kale's voice grew sharper. Look at him. Thin arms, no claws, no scales, no glow. How do humans survive among the stars? Perhaps they beg stronger races for protection. Perhaps they hide when danger comes. Tell me, human, do you bow to all who stand taller than you? The court roared with more laughter. Joran stood in silence. His eyes met Kale's for a moment, and there was no anger there, only calm. He bowed his head slightly, turned, and began to walk toward the exit of the hall. His boots struck the polished floor with steady rhythm. The laughter slowed. Some nobles frowned. They had expected protest, perhaps a defense of honor, perhaps even a challenge. But Joran said nothing. He did not shout. He did not argue. He did not even glance back at the prince who had insulted him. He walked as though the words had never touched him at all. Kale's smile faded. His laughter caught in his throat. He turned to his advisors, but none returned his look. Some of them whispered quietly to each other. Silence, the very silence Joran had chosen, now filled the hall more heavily than laughter had. Joran left the chamber without a word. The great doors closed behind him. For a long moment, the court stood unsure. Kale cleared his throat and raised his hand as if to regain control. He walks away because he knows he cannot defend himself, the prince declared. He fears my words. But in the corners of the hall, the whispers grew stronger. One elder leaned toward another and murmured, or perhaps he fears nothing at all. Kale heard, though the words were not meant for him. A sharp feeling stirred in his chest. He told himself it was anger, but a deeper part of him wondered if it was something else. Why had the human not spoken? Why had he not begged, not argued, not even looked wounded? Pride burned in Kale's heart, yet the image of Joran's calm silence stayed with him like a shadow that could not be dismissed. Outside, Joran walked through the palace gardens toward the human quarters. The wind carried the scent of flowering vines, and the ground shone with stones that glowed faintly in the twin sunlight. His steps remained steady, his face unreadable. He heard the faint echoes of laughter behind him, but he also knew that silence had cut through it. To him, there was no reason to trade words with a boy king who measured strength only by crowns and jewels. As he entered the quiet corridors leading back to his quarters, Joran allowed a small breath to escape. His mission had just begun, and already the court was watching. He knew this would not be the last time Prince Kael tested him. And so the first day in the palace of Vera ended, not with a treaty, nor with war, but with silence, a silence that began to work upon every mind that had witnessed it. The morning after the royal gathering, the grand hall of Vera still buzzed with talk of what had happened. Nobles moved through the marble corridors in small groups, their voices low yet filled with curiosity. None of them spoke of the prince's words, nor of the jewels in his crown. Instead, they spoke of the human who had walked away without saying a single thing. One elder shook his head as he stood near a balcony. The young prince meant to crush the human with laughter, yet it is the silence we remember. Strange, is it not, that the quiet of one man weighs more than the words of 100? Another noble frowned. Perhaps it is weakness. Perhaps he had no answer, so he left. But the elder replied, if he were weak, he would have begged. If he were broken, he would have lowered his eyes. Instead, he left with calm steps. Do you not see the strength in that? Their words spread across the palace like ripples in a pond. Servants repeated the story. Guards spoke of it at their posts. Even the scholars in the libraries whispered about the human envoy who did not defend himself yet seemed untouched by insult. Inside his private chamber, Prince Kael sat on a throne carved from crystal. His crown rested on the table beside him, and his hands clenched the arms of the seat. He had heard the whispers. They crawled into his ears no matter where he went. The young prince had expected victory in that hall, a moment where his voice would rise above all others, showing his court that he was already strong enough to rule. Instead, the memory of Joran's silence grew larger each hour. Kael's chief advisor, an old scholar named Saren, entered the chamber. His robe of deep blue shimmered faintly in the light of the twin suns. He bowed with respect before speaking. My prince, the court stirs. They speak less of your command and more of the envoy's silence. Kael frowned. They should laugh at the human, not honor him. He showed no fire, no spirit. Saren studied the young royal carefully. Sometimes fire is not needed to burn. Sometimes silence itself is a flame, one that consumes slowly. The nobles think on his calmness because they cannot understand it. And what we do not understand, we remember. Kael's voice grew sharp. Are you saying he is stronger than me? I say only this, Saren answered gently. Be wary of dismissing those who do not shout. The human carries something within him, though I cannot yet name it. Kael rose from his seat, restless. He walked toward the window that overlooked the city below. Towers of light stretched into the sky, and ships moved like silver birds between the spires. His people lived in pride, in wealth, in greatness. How could a plain human unsettle him so deeply? Meanwhile, Joran sat in the human quarters with his small team. The room was simple compared to the grand chambers of the nobles. Its walls were smooth and white, its light soft. Around the table sat three others, Tomash, a quiet engineer with strong hands, Alen, a younger officer with sharp eyes, and Myra, a diplomat known for her calm voice. Alen leaned forward, his voice low. The prince insulted you before the whole court. Why did you not answer? Why did you walk away? Joran's expression did not change. Because words are air. Air passes quickly. Silence remains. Do you think the court remembers his insult today? Or do they remember that I left without fear? Myra nodded slowly. You turned his power against him. He wished to humiliate you, yet now his own words seem smaller. The court speaks of you more than him. Tomash, who rarely spoke, finally added, machines can break when pressed too hard. But silence makes others wonder if they are the ones about to break. Joran gave a faint smile at that. We are not here to fight in their games of pride. We are here to show what humanity is, not in words but in action. Let them whisper. In time, our deeds will answer every doubt. Later that day, the court gathered again in the library hall, a vast chamber filled with glowing shelves that stretched into the high ceiling. Scrolls and crystals of knowledge lined the walls, and the nobles studied them as they spoke. Kale entered, his steps quick, his eyes searching for Joran. When he saw the human across the hall, standing quietly with his team, his heart gave a strange pull. He wanted to approach, to demand a reason for that silence. Yet pride held him back. To question the human would show weakness. So instead, Kale raised his voice for all to hear. "Behold the envoy of Earth," he said. "A man who will not speak unless pressed. Perhaps he thinks silence is strength. Perhaps he hides fear behind calmness. Tell us, human, do you ever raise your voice, or do you only walk away?" Every noble turned to watch. The air grew still. Joran looked at the prince, his face calm, his eyes steady. He did not answer. He bowed his head once, then returned his gaze to the shelves of knowledge as though Kale's words had never reached him. The hall filled with whispers again, louder than before. Some nobles smiled faintly, others frowned. But none looked to the prince with admiration. They looked to the human who once again refused to play their game. Kale's chest tightened. For the first time, he wondered if he had lost, not in battle, not in war, but in something greater. The palace of Vera shone in the twin suns, yet within the human quarters the air felt heavy. Joran's team gathered around a low table made of dark stone. They had already heard how the court spoke of the envoy's silence for a second day in a row. Rumors had reached every corner of the city. Some said the human was too weak to speak. Others whispered he was stronger than anyone there understood. Alen, the youngest of the group, leaned forward with restless energy. "We cannot keep ignoring him. The prince will only push harder. He wants you to break, Joran. If you remain silent every time, he may twist that into weakness." Myra, calm as ever, shook her head. "But look at what has already happened. The court no longer mocks us. They whisper. They wonder. Silence has turned into a mystery, and mystery carries power." Alen frowned. "Mystery may work for a time, but sooner or later, words will be needed." Joran's steady eyes moved between them. "Words are needed, yes, but not the kind spoken to answer pride. We are not here to defend ourselves from insult. We are here to show the truth of who we are. Humanity does not rise through crowns or jewels. We rise through resilience, through deeds, through spirit. That is the human way." Tomash, the engineer, finally spoke, his voice low but strong. "Deeds speak longer than speeches. When a machine breaks, it does not matter what you say to it. What matters is who can fix it." Joran nodded. "Exactly. The prince and his nobles may laugh at us for lacking glow or scales, but when something fails, who will step forward to mend it? That is when they will see us clearly." Their meeting ended with quiet agreement. Each member of the team carried the same resolve. They would not waste energy battling words in the court. They would wait, and when the moment came, they would let actions prove what no answer could. Later that day, the humans walked through the palace gardens. Flowers of silver petals turned toward the suns, and fountains rose high, scattering drops that shone like jewels. Nobles strolled the paths, their voices soft, their robes flowing. Many glanced at the humans, some with curiosity, some with a hint of respect. One noble approached, an older woman with hair like flowing crystal. "Envoy Joran," she said, her voice measured. "The court stirs because of you. The prince's words fall empty, while your silence grows. But tell me, why do you not defend yourself? Why do you not show pride as others do?" Joran looked at her calmly. Because pride is not defense. Pride is a chain. If I answer him with anger, I bind myself to his game. I will not let my strength be measured by insult. Humanity has learned that silence can be sharper than steel. The noble studied him for a long moment before bowing her head slightly. Perhaps there is wisdom in your path. She turned and walked away, her robe trailing like water. Several other nobles had heard the exchange. Their eyes followed Joran with new thoughtfulness. In another part of the palace, Kale heard reports of this encounter. His fists clenched as his advisor Saren spoke of the noble's respectful tone toward the human. They begin to see him as more than an envoy, Saren said. They see him as a man of strength, though he does not raise his voice. Kale paced across his chamber. He is nothing but a quiet shadow, yet they admire him. Why? What has he done? Sometimes, my prince, Saren answered softly, doing nothing is the greatest act. Silence forces others to face their own noise. That is why it unsettles you. That is why it unsettles the court. Kale's pride burned. He told himself he would find a way to break the silence, to force the human into the open, to make him speak and show weakness. That evening, Joran stood with his team near the outer balcony that overlooked the shining city. Ships rose and fell between the towers. The glow of the suns painted the sky in red and gold. Myra broke the quiet. Do you think the prince will change his ways? Joran's gaze remained on the horizon. He is young. He knows power but not its weight. Change may come, but not because of words. Change comes when one is faced with truth, and truth cannot be denied forever. Tomasz adjusted the small tool case at his side. Machines do not change by being told they are broken. They change when someone repairs them. Alan let out a long breath. Then we wait. And when the chance comes, we show them. Joran finally turned to his team, his voice steady. Yes. Let the prince play his games. We will not bow to insult, nor rise to anger. We will walk the human way. And when the moment arrives, the court of Vero will see us as we truly are. The suns dipped lower, and the city lights of Vero began to shine. In the palace above the towers, whispers of silence still moved from ear to ear. And in the heart of Prince Kale, pride and unease wrestled in quiet battle, a battle not yet decided. The palace of Vero gleamed under the twin suns, its towers shining like polished blades against the sky. Yet within its walls, the mood was no longer steady. The whispers about the human envoy had grown louder, and every noble seemed to carry an opinion. Some admired his quiet strength, others doubted his purpose, and a few wondered if Earth had sent him as part of a hidden plan. Prince Kale sat in the Hall of Statues, a long corridor where the stone figures of past rulers stood in silent rows. Their carved eyes seemed to watch him as he walked between them. His footsteps echoed against the floor, sharp and restless. Saren, the old advisor, followed at a careful distance. The court grows divided, my prince, he said in a low voice. Some begin to look upon the human with respect. They say his silence is proof of discipline. They admire that he does not bow to your words. Kale stopped at the base of a tall statue, his jaw tight. Discipline? No. It is arrogance. He dares to ignore me in my own hall. He must believe his silence makes him strong, but I will prove otherwise. Be cautious, Saren warned gently. The court already questions your judgment. If you push too hard, they may see it as fear. Strength is not always shown by striking, but by knowing when not to strike. Kale did not answer. His pride was wounded, and pride often closed his ears to counsel. Meanwhile, in the human quarters, Joran's team continued their quiet work. Tomasz spent his time studying the palace's older systems. He discovered that many of the energy conduits were fragile, built long ago and not repaired in decades. Alan assisted him, eager to learn, while Myra recorded notes for future reports. Joran himself moved with calm purpose, often walking through the palace gardens and halls, observing. He did not seek attention, yet attention followed him. Servants bowed as he passed, guards nodded with quiet respect, and nobles paused to watch him. The more Kale tried to mock him, the more others began to wonder about the man who refused to answer insult with anger. One afternoon, Joran and his team were invited to a smaller gathering in the Hall of Music, where nobles from many worlds listened to performances of sound and light. Instruments of glass strings and humming crystals filled the air with gentle tones. The nobles spoke politely, yet Joran noticed how often their eyes turned toward him. A tall noble with scaled skin approached. "Envoy Joran," he said, "I once thought silence was emptiness. Now I wonder if silence is strength. Your calmness unsettles even the proudest among us. How do humans find such patience?" Joran gave a simple answer. "Patience is not a gift. It is a choice. We choose it because without patience, we lose more than we gain." The noble bowed slightly. "Then perhaps your people carry more wisdom than I believed." Others who overheard nodded in quiet agreement. Word of this exchange spread quickly, and by the time the gathering ended, Joran's image had grown further in the minds of many. Kale heard of it that evening. He sat in his chamber, fists tight against the arms of his chair. They speak of him as if he were a teacher. As if his silence makes him greater than a prince. He is nothing but a visitor. Why do they look to him and not to me? Saren, standing nearby, answered calmly. Because he does not seek their gaze. That is why they give it freely. You, my prince, demand it, and so they resist. He ignores it, and so they offer it. Kale rose in anger, pacing the room. Then I will find a way to strip this mask from him. I will make him speak, and when he does, they will see he is nothing but a man. But the chance Kale sought did not come in the way he expected. The next day, during a grand feast in the Hall of Stars, a sudden tremor shook the palace. Dishes fell from tables, lights flickered, and the floor rumbled beneath them. Nobles gasped, some shouting in fear as the tremor grew stronger. The great crystal ceiling above cracked slightly, sending tiny shards to the ground. Servants ran to check the systems. Guards shouted orders. Panic rippled through the hall. Joran's eyes narrowed. He had felt such tremors before, though not here. He rose from his seat, calm as ever, and looked at Tomash. The engineer already carried a small device at his belt. "The conduits," Tomash said quickly. "I told you they were old. One must have failed. If we do not act, the palace could lose its energy core." Myra turned to Joran. "Should we wait for their engineers?" "No," Joran answered. "If their system collapses, the whole city may suffer. We act now." Without hesitation, the humans moved swiftly toward the lower halls, while nobles remained in confusion. Some whispered, others stared. Prince Kale, standing at the high table, watched as the human who had been silent in words now rushed forward in action. And in that moment, the cracks in the court grew wider. The tremor spread through the palace like a rolling storm. Chandeliers of crystal swayed, and the great walls groaned as though the very bones of the building were straining. Panic grew louder in the Hall of Stars. Nobles shouted for guards, servants ran without direction, and fear filled the air like smoke. At the high table, Prince Kale gripped the edge, his eyes wide. For the first time in his short rule, he felt the weight of helplessness. He wanted to shout orders, yet none came to his lips. In the chaos, only the humans moved with purpose. Joran's voice cut through the noise, calm and steady. "Tomash, find the conduits. Alen, with him. Myra, alert the nearest engineers. We move now." Without hesitation, Tomash and Alen pushed through the rushing crowd, their boots striking firmly on the trembling floor. Joran followed close behind, his steps measured, his eyes sharp. Myra broke away toward the guards, her voice firm, urging them to guide people to safety. The lower halls of the palace were darker, filled with humming pipes and glowing conduits that carried energy throughout the structure. The tremor was stronger here, and sparks danced from cracked panels. The smell of burning metal filled the air. Tomasz knelt beside a junction box, opening it with practiced speed. Inside, a glowing core pulsed irregularly, sending waves of unstable energy through the wires. "It is worse than I thought," he said quickly. "The main conduit is fractured. If it collapses, the palace core will overload. Half the city could lose power." Alan's eyes widened. "How long do we have?" "Minutes," Tomasz answered. Joran studied the wires, his brow furrowed. "Can you hold it?" "I can try," Tomasz said, sweat already forming on his forehead. "But this system is alien. Their engineers use order and pattern. I need to think like them, and also unlike them." Joran placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Do it the human way. Improvise. Use what you have." Tomasz nodded. He pulled tools from his belt, sparks flying as he cut into the damaged wires. Alan helped him hold pieces in place, using strips of metal from the walls as makeshift braces. Above them, another tremor shook the palace. Dust rained from the ceiling, and a loud crack echoed through the halls. Joran looked upward, then back to his team. "Faster." In the Hall of Stars, nobles clutched one another in fear as cracks spread across the crystal ceiling. Some begged Kale for direction. Yet the young prince stood frozen, his crown trembling slightly on his head. He watched as guards ran aimlessly, none knowing how to stop the danger. Then Myra's voice rang out as she returned with a group of engineers. "The humans are already below, working to stop the failure. Follow me if you wish to help." Gasps filled the hall. The humans were in the danger while the nobles stood in safety. Some nobles looked ashamed, others curious, and still others whispered in disbelief. Kale clenched his fists. The humans, whom he had mocked, were risking everything while he, the Prince of Vera, stood powerless. In the lower halls, Tomasz gave a sharp cry. "The core is breaking open. I cannot seal it with tools alone." Joran knelt beside him. "What do you need?" "A conductor," Tomasz said quickly. "Something to channel the unstable energy until the flow balances. Without it, the surge will destroy everything." Joran looked around. He saw no spare parts, no polished tools. Only his own belt of metal clasps and the thin rods along the wall. He unbuckled his belt, pulling free a strip of reinforced alloy, and handed it to Tomasz. "Use this," Joran said. "It will hold for as long as it needs to." Tomasz caught it, his hands moving quickly. Sparks burst as he forced the alloy into the broken conduit. For a moment, the light flared so bright it burned their eyes. Then the pulsing glow steadied, softer, smoother. The tremor faded. The palace stilled. The groaning walls grew quiet. Tomasz fell back, his chest heaving. "It will not last forever," he said, "but it will hold until they rebuild it." Joran stood, his calm face marked with sweat and dust. "That is enough. You saved the palace." Alan let out a long breath of relief. "And perhaps the city too." Above them, the Hall of Stars erupted in cries as the tremors ended. Nobles embraced, servants wept, and the ceiling held firm. Word spread quickly that the humans had stopped the disaster. When Joran and his team returned to the hall, their uniforms marked with soot and sparks, silence fell. Every noble turned to watch them. Some bowed their heads in gratitude. Others simply stared, unable to understand how plain humans had done what none of them could. Prince Kale stood frozen. He wanted to speak, to reclaim his authority, but his voice would not rise. His court no longer looked to him. They looked to the envoy he had insulted. Joran gave a simple nod to the hall, then walked calmly to his place at the table. He said nothing. He did not boast, did not remind them of his silence, did not claim honor. His actions had spoken. The court listened. And Kale felt the weight of a truth he could no longer deny. The palace stood calm again, though cracks still lined its walls and the scent of smoke lingered in the air. Workers moved quickly to repair the damage, while nobles whispered about what had taken place. Everywhere, the words were the same: it was the humans who had acted when no one else dared. Joran and his team returned to their quarters quietly, their uniforms marked with soot and their faces weary. Tomasz carried burns on his hands, yet he showed no complaint. Alan's eyes still held the sharp edge of adrenaline, and Myra carried a notebook filled with hurried records of what had been done. As they entered the room, Alan broke the silence first. The whole court watched us. Did you see their faces? They did not believe we could do it, but we did. Tomasz sat down heavily, flexing his sore fingers. It was close. Too close. But it held because we refused to stop. That is all. We refused. Myra poured water into small cups and set them on the table. Refusal to give up is often what defines us. That is what they saw. Joran nodded slowly. Yes. Not our tools, not our strength, not even our knowledge. What they saw was the simple truth: humans endure. Where others wait, we act. Where others fear, we step forward. That is our way. For a time, they sat in quiet reflection. None of them wished for praise. The work had spoken for itself, and that was enough. Across the palace, however, Prince Kale struggled with a storm of thoughts. He sat alone in his chamber, the crown set aside on a table, the gems in its surface flickering dimly. He remembered the moment the tremor struck, the ceiling above them cracking, the nobles crying out for direction. He remembered his own stillness, the weight that had frozen him to the floor. And he remembered the humans rushing into the danger while he, the heir of Vera, did nothing. His pride burned. He wanted to dismiss them as reckless. He wanted to believe they had acted without wisdom. Yet each time he tried to form that thought, another memory returned: the image of Joran's calm face as he led his team into the trembling halls, the sight of Tomasz burned hands repairing what no one else could, the silence Joran carried even when victory was his. Kale's chest tightened. He whispered into the empty room, "Why do they not boast? Why do they not claim honor?" There was no answer but his own thoughts. Later that evening, the nobles gathered in the council chamber. They praised the humans openly, some calling them saviors, others calling them allies worth more than jewels. A few even suggested that Earth should be given greater voice in the alliance. Kale sat at the head of the table, but the words did not flow to him. They flowed past him, toward the humans. His jaw tightened as he tried to maintain his composure. When the nobles finished, Kale rose to speak. The humans acted with speed, yes, he said, his voice loud enough to carry. But we must not forget this is our palace, our city, our world. It was our systems that failed. Their actions were useful, but they do not rule here. Some nobles nodded politely, but their eyes no longer held the same glow of loyalty they once gave him. Their gazes drifted back to Joran, who sat calm and quiet at the far end of the table. Kale's words felt hollow, and he knew it. His crown seemed heavier than before. When the council ended, Kale found himself unable to rest. He left his chamber and walked the palace gardens under the light of the twin moons. The air was cool, and the flowers gave off a gentle glow. He expected to be alone, yet ahead he saw Joran, standing quietly near a fountain, watching the water ripple in silver arcs. For a long moment, Kale did not move. Then, with slow steps, he approached. His pride resisted, yet something deeper pushed him forward. "You should have spoken," Kale said, his voice quiet in the night air. "You saved the palace. The court would have bowed to you. Yet you remain silent. Why? Joran turned his head slightly, meeting Kale's eyes. His face carried no anger, no mockery, only calm. Because honor is not taken by words. It is given by actions. We did what had to be done. That is enough. Kale felt the weight of those words strike deeper than any insult. He wanted to argue, but no answer came. He stood there, a young prince before a man who carried no crown, yet seemed greater than any ruler he had ever known. Joran bowed his head slightly, then returned his gaze to the fountain. He did not wait for Kale's reply. The silence that followed was heavier than any voice. Kale walked back to his chamber with his thoughts burning. For the first time in his life, he questioned what it meant to be strong. The days following the palace crisis were filled with rebuilding. Workers moved through the halls with tools, engineers repaired conduits, and servants cleaned the broken pieces of crystal from the floors. Yet more than the walls of the palace had been shaken. The court itself had changed. Where once the nobles had looked only to Prince Kale for guidance, now they looked to the humans with quiet respect. They whispered of Tamash burned hands, of Alan's steady courage, of Myra's clear orders, and most of all of Joran's calm leadership. Their story spread far beyond the palace, carried through the city like a song that grew with each retelling. Prince Kale felt the change with every step he took. When he entered a hall, the nobles bowed, but their eyes no longer shone with the same light as before. When he spoke, they listened politely, yet their thoughts drifted toward the envoy who had not spoken at all. In his chamber, Kale sat long into the night, the crown resting untouched beside him. He thought of his father's teachings, of the pride that had always filled the throne of Vera, of the way he had mocked Joran in the grand hall. At the time, he had believed himself powerful. Now those words seemed small, almost childish. On the third day, a council was called to honor the humans before their departure. The chamber was full, with nobles from many worlds seated around the wide table. Banners of silver and gold hung from the walls, and the twin suns shone through tall windows, bathing the room in warm light. When the humans entered, the chamber grew silent. They wore their plain uniforms, marked by soot and dust from their work. Yet to the eyes of the nobles, those marks shone brighter than any jewel. The high speaker of the council, an elder with hair like silver threads, rose to speak. Envoys of Earth, your actions saved not only this palace but also the city beyond its walls. You acted without hesitation when others stood frozen. You have shown us that strength does not always come from crowns or from power, but from the will to endure. For this, we give you our gratitude. The chamber filled with the sound of hands striking the table in respect, the traditional salute of the Varans. Joran bowed his head but said nothing. His silence carried the same weight it always had, steady and unshaken. Kale sat at the far end, his chest heavy. He knew the moment had come for him to choose to cling to pride or to face the truth. Slowly, he rose from his seat. The chamber grew still, for the young prince had not spoken since the disaster. All eyes turned to him. He walked across the chamber, each step measured. When he reached Joran, he stopped and lowered his head. His voice was clear, though softer than before. Envoy of Earth, I wronged you. In my pride, I believed silence to be weakness. I mocked you before my court, yet you showed a strength greater than I have ever known. When danger came, you did not boast, you did not seek honor, you acted. You saved my people when I could not. For that, I bow to you. And before the entire court, the young prince of Vera bent his knee. Gasps rose from the nobles, for no royal had ever bowed to an envoy of another world. Joran looked down at him, his expression calm. He did not speak, did not lift the prince with words. Instead, he offered a simple gesture. He placed his hand lightly on Kale's shoulder, a sign of respect between equals, and then stepped back. The silence that followed was deeper than any voice, and in that silence, the court understood. The humans departed the next morning. The palace gates opened, and crowds filled the streets to watch their small group walk to their ship. Some bowed, some raised their hands in salute, and many whispered blessings. The humans walked with steady steps, not waving, not calling out, simply carrying themselves as they always had, calm, patient, and enduring. Prince Kale stood on the high balcony, watching them go. The crown rested on his head once more, but it felt different now. No longer only a symbol of pride, it had become a weight of responsibility. Saren, the old advisor, joined him. "You have seen, my prince, what many rulers never learn. Power is not found in jewels or titles. It is found in the heart, in the will to act when all others hesitate." Kale nodded slowly. His eyes followed the departing humans until their ship lifted into the sky, a trail of light fading behind it. "I insulted him," Kale said quietly. "And he gave me no words in return. Only silence. Yet that silence has taught me more than speeches ever could." Saren smiled faintly. "Then remember it. For one day, when you sit upon the throne as king, it will be that lesson which guides you." The young prince lowered his head in thought. He knew the memory of Joran's silence would stay with him all his life. Far above the city, the human ship broke through the sky and vanished into the stars. They left no grand words behind, no long promises, only the echo of their actions. And in the heart of Vera, the 19-year-old royal who once laughed at humanity carried with him a new truth that silence can speak, humility can rule, and strength is not in crowns but in the courage to endure.